They threw him out of a helicopter at 8,000 feet. No parachute, no mercy, no chance. But when the sun rose over the Afghan mountains, the impossible happened. He stood up, broken, bleeding, yet alive. What followed wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a battle for truth, redemption, and the soul of a soldier who refused to stay down. Because sometimes the fall doesn't end you. It reveals who you really are. The rotors of the Black Hawk screamed against the thin Afghan air, slicing through the mountain wind like a mechanical beast hunting its prey. Inside the cabin, the red interior lights painted every face in shades of blood and shadow. Adam Briggs sat near the open door, strapped in his gloved hand, resting on his rifle. He wasn't supposed to be here anymore. Those days, the years of missions no one would ever know about, were supposed to be behind him. But when the call came in from command about a missing relief team on the border ridge, he couldn't say no. They said it was just recon, nothing heavy. That was the first lie. Adam's eyes scanned the compartment. 5 soldiers. New gear, unfamiliar faces. Their uniforms bore no unit insignias. The smell of oil and dust hung thick, mixed with something colder tension. His instincts sharpened by years, as an army ranger hummed with quiet alarm. The man across from him, Sergeant Blake Rourke, met his gaze for a second too long before looking away. Blake's jaw clenched around a stick of gum, his hand tapping on the rifle in rhythm with the helicopter's vibration. Adam noticed the small scar above the man's temple, the kind that came from close combat. But it wasn't the scar that bothered him. It was the silence. The kind of silence that comes before something breaks. The pilot's voice crackled in the headset. Approaching drop zone in 60 seconds. Adam leaned toward the cockpit. Copy that. Any update from the ground team static. Then nothing. He frowned. The mountains below were endless, sharp, and ghostly under the moonlight. A place where even God's whispers got lost in the wind. Strange night, Blake muttered, his voice low, almost like the world's holding its breath. Adam gave a short, dry chuckle. It always does before the storm. Then movement. A hand signal between Blake and the man to his right. Subtle. Quick. The kind of coded gesture no regular grunt would notice. But Adam did. His pupils narrowed. He shifted slightly, unbuckling his side strap, pretending to check his weapon. "Everything good back there?" the pilot asked. Blake grinned. "All good, sir. Just making sure our guest of honor's comfortable." Guest Adam's brow furrowed. What's that supposed to click? Metal against metal. Time slowed. Blake's hand shot to the release latch on Adam's harness. Another man moved behind him too fast. Adam twisted instinct, screaming, but it was already too late. The strap snapped. A knife flashed. Then came the voice, calm and clinical through the headset. "Sorry, Briggs. This isn't personal." The wind hit him like a hammer as the door flung wide. For one horrifying second, Adam saw the whites of their eyes. No hatred, no rage, just cold obedience. Then gravity ripped him from the chopper and into the black sky. The world exploded into silence. 8,000 feet above jagged stone and darkness, Adam Briggs fell. The first-second denial. This can't be happening. The second instinct. Arms spread. Legs angled, body aligned with the rushing wind. The third clarity. He wasn't dead, not yet. The helicopter was already a distant silhouette above him, shrinking, turning toward the horizon. The wind screamed past his ears, drowning everything else. He could feel his heart slamming against his ribs like a desperate prisoner. But inside his mind, a soldier's calm took over, the same calm that had kept him alive in deserts, jungles, and alleys that smelled of gunpowder and fear. He analyzed, calculated. Velocity approximately 180 miles per hour. Altitude 8,000 feet. Terrain below mountains, rocks. Wait there. A shimmer silver in the moonlight. A river. Narrow. Fast. A thread of life in a valley of death. His breath came hard through clenched teeth. 3 seconds to think Briggs, he muttered to himself. That's all you get. 3 seconds. He remembered his son's voice. Caleb, 9 years old, sitting cross-legged on the porch, back home, building a model helicopter out of old soda cans. Dad, you said if you ever fall, you just have to pick the right place to land. Adam smiled, the ghost of that memory flickering through his mind as the earth raced toward him. He adjusted his arms, tilted his torso, angled his legs to change his descent. Wind resistance fought him, clawing at every inch of fabric. He aimed for the river's curve, the deepest point he could estimate from above. The last second came fast. Let's see if I still remember how to fly, he whispered. Impact. The collision was a roar of physics and pain. Water erupted like a bomb, swallowing him whole. His body hit the surface at a shallow angle just right to keep from shattering every bone, just wrong enough to feel like fire ripping through his veins. His shoulder dislocated instantly. His ribs screamed. His vision went white. When the light faded, he was sinking, spinning lungs burning for air. He kicked upward, broke the surface and gasped. The freezing water bit into his skin, pulling at his fatigues like claws. He coughed, blood mixing with river foam. Alive. Somehow. Impossibly alive. He let the current carry him downstream until the roar softened into whispers. Then, with the last of his strength, he clawed at the rocks, dragging himself onto the muddy bank. Every breath hurt. Every movement was war. The stars above were sharp, endless, indifferent. He rolled onto his back and stared at them, chest heaving. His vision blurred at the edges. Something metallic clinked against his throat, his dog tag. He touched it, tracing the worn engraving with trembling fingers. For Caleb, so he'll never fear the fall. Adam let out a shaky laugh that turned into a cough. Blood spotted the ground beside him. Somewhere miles above, that Black Hawk was cutting through the night, and inside it, the men who'd betrayed him thought they'd erased a ghost. He smiled bitterly. They have no idea, he whispered to the empty valley, who they just threw out of the sky. His vision dimmed, the mountains closing in like silent giants. Before darkness took him, he pressed a hand to his chest, not to pray, but to promise. Tomorrow, if he woke up, he wouldn't just survive. He'd make them remember. The wind carried his final breath into the night, a whisper of defiance echoing through the canyon. And somewhere in the shadows, the river kept flowing, as if it knew this was not the end. The cold came first, not the kind that numbs, the kind that bites. Adam Briggs lay half-submerged on the rocky shore, the river pulling gently at his legs like it wanted him back. Each breath was a negotiation with pain. His right shoulder pulsed in agony, dislocated. His ribs throbbed, each inhale carving fire into his chest. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, mixing with the silt below. He was alive, but just barely. The stars overhead blinked with indifference. The mountains loomed like judges in the dark, silent and ancient. Somewhere, an owl called. Somewhere further, a wolf answered. And Adam, a broken man on a foreign riverbank, took stock of everything. Inventory Briggs, he told himself. Start with what matters. Fingers moving, legs numb but intact. Breathing shallow. Ribs likely cracked, maybe broken. Eyesight blurry but steady. Memory sharp as ever. Spirit bruised, but unbroken. The taste of blood in his mouth was metallic hot. He spit into the dirt and forced his eyes open wider. The pain was real, but so was the silence. No pursuit. No searchlights. That meant they thought he was dead. And that was the only card he had. 3 seconds. That's all he'd had. 3 seconds between betrayal and freefall. In those moments, those impossible, screaming, infinite moments, He didn't panic. He did what he'd been trained to do. Think. Analyze. Adjust. He remembered the wind, sheer the weight of his boots, the slant of the valley below. He recalled his son's face, the smell of motor oil in Caleb's hair, the way the boy always asked too many questions, just like his mother. He remembered the promise he made when she passed. "You'll never have to be afraid, Caleb. Not while I'm still breathing." And that's what saved him. Not the angle of his descent. Not the sharp instinct honed by war. Not even the river. It was the promise. Pain sharpened everything. With a groan, Adam rolled to his side. The dislocated shoulder sent a lightning bolt of agony down his spine. His breath caught in his throat. He reached for the joint with his opposite hand, bracing against a nearby stone. 1, 2, he whispered. Then with a grunt yanked. The shoulder popped back in with a sickening crack. He screamed into the dirt, biting his own arm to muffle the sound. His vision went white, then dark, then slowly returned in a swirl of stars and nausea. When it cleared, he was drenched in sweat, shaking but functional. That would have to be enough. The surrounding terrain was brutal, jagged shale, narrow paths, loose rock. But Adam recognized the geography. These mountains had held secrets long before men started carving borders through them. And he remembered this sector barely from a mission years ago. If memory served, there was a natural crevice half a mile upriver, a place to hide, to heal, to think. He tore a strip from his sleeve and tied it tight around his ribs to keep them compressed. The makeshift brace hurt like hell, but it held. Each movement was agony, but he moved anyway. Crawling at first, then limping, then dragging himself uphill through brush and darkness away from the river. The world had no moon that night, only stars and wind. An hour passed, then another. His body screamed at him to stop, to rest, to die. But he didn't listen, because dying was easy, and living took choice, and he still had one. Finally, he reached the crevice. A jagged slash in the rock wall just wide enough for a man to slide into. He collapsed inside, curling his battered body against the stone. This place. It was familiar. A memory surfaced a cold night years ago when he and his ranger team had waited here during a sandstorm. He remembered carving his initials into the wall back then, a joke between brothers. He turned his head slowly and squinted in the dark. There, barely visible beneath moss and age AB. Still here. Like a ghost reaching out from another life. Adam exhaled. He was no longer falling. Now he was hiding. Now he was planning. With trembling fingers, he checked the pockets of his soaked vest. Most of it was lost or ruined in the fall. But by some miracle tucked in the interior lining was the tiny emergency transceiver. An old habit. Something he kept even after retirement. He flicked it on. Static buzzed faintly. The antenna was cracked, but the receiver still caught occasional signals. He turned the dial tuning carefully through the interference. Then a voice, faint, garbled. But there. Target neutralized. Confirm payment. Adam froze. Another voice responded. Payment processed. Voss says the package is clean. That name. Voss. Lieutenant Colonel Harland Voss, his former commanding officer. The man who had sent him on this mission. Adam's jaw clenched. So this wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't a field op gone bad. It was an execution. Ordered. Bought. Paid for. The realization cut deeper than the fall. He stared into the darkness, heart pounding. Why were you, Adam? He didn't know, not yet. But he would find out. He reached into his shirt and pulled the dog tag from under his collar. The steel was cold against his fingers. He closed his eyes and whispered, "For Caleb." Somewhere above and far away, a helicopter disappeared into the horizon, carrying men who believed they had buried a secret. But that secret was breathing, broken, bleeding, furious, and very much alive. Morning didn't arrive gently. It cracked across the sky like a whip, harsh, blinding, and merciless. Adam Briggs opened his eyes to a light that stabbed at his skull. Every nerve in his body screamed. His tongue was dry and tasted of copper. The pain hadn't faded overnight. It had multiplied, organizing itself into a brutal orchestra that played with every twitch of muscle. The air was thin and freezing. His breath rose in small clouds that drifted into the crevice ceiling. His body had stiffened from the cold. The river he'd crawled away from last night was still murmuring in the distance, the same river that had both nearly killed him and somehow kept him alive. He tried to sit up. Bad idea. Agony tore through his ribs like barbed wire. His shoulder throbbed, held together by grit and luck. Every movement felt like peeling open old wounds, but he had no time for comfort. He wasn't safe, not even close. With trembling hands, Adam reached into the side pouch of his vest and pulled out a single foil-wrapped energy gel. It had survived the fall miraculously. He bit into it, forcing the thick, bitter paste down his throat. It wasn't food. It was fuel. Enough to push the pain back a few feet. His boots were soaked, his fingers numb. He peeled off his outer jacket, wrung it out, and pressed it to his face. The cold made his skin sting, but it woke him up. Focused him. Then he saw it. A dark stain spreading across his side. Not just Bruce's blood. He lifted the torn fabric. 2 of his ribs had likely cracked, maybe punctured something. The bleeding wasn't gushing, but steady. Internal trauma was a silent killer. He needed pressure. Fast. He pulled a strip from the inside lining of his jacket, folded it tightly, and pressed it to the wound. Then, using his belt, he secured it tight around his torso. Every breath was shallow and mechanical. 1 breath at a time, Briggs, just like they taught you in ranger school. But this wasn't training. This was survival, slow, lonely, and unforgiving. Midday came with a ghost of warmth enough to thaw the stiffness in his legs. He emerged from the crevice, half-hunched, like a man 3 decades older. His boots crunched against gravel as he descended toward the riverbank. The flow was calmer here, but cold as death. He dipped his hands in and splashed his face, the water shocking his senses awake. Then he washed the blood from his hands, not because it helped, but because it felt like control. He looked at his reflection in the water. Sunken eyes, cracked lips, a bruise blooming across his cheek. Stubble darkened his jaw, but his eyes were still sharp, still full of fight. That's when he noticed it. The dog tag still hanging around his neck, glinting in the morning sun. He held it up. Just like last night, the words stared back at him. For Caleb. So he'll never fear the fall. The metal was warm now, not from the sun, but from him. From being pressed against his chest as he fell, as he fought, as he crawled. That tag wasn't decoration. It was declaration. He wasn't done. He returned to the crevice and took inventory. The emergency transceiver still had some battery. He turned it on again. Static. Then faint voices. Still no sign. Assumed dead. Package secured. He recorded the clip with a backup chip embedded inside the unit. Intel. Proof. If he made it out alive, that clip alone could unravel everything. But he needed more. Suddenly, a sharp sound cracked through the air, distant but familiar. Rotor blades. He froze. A helicopter, small, not military. More likely a scout or cargo bird. It was flying a low pattern hugging the ridgeline. Adam ducked instinctively, pressing flat to the rock face. He waited. Counted the beats of the rotor. Judged its direction. They weren't looking for him. Not yet. But they would be, because somewhere out there, Blake Rourke and the others were reporting back. Lying. Covering tracks. And whoever had paid for Adam's body to hit the rocks, they'd want confirmation. Which meant they'd come back. Which meant Adam had a small window. As the chopper's sound faded, he stood slowly and scanned the landscape. From this point, he could reach the high ridge to the north by sundown. It would give him visual advantage and possibly access to the old comms relay station he remembered from past ops. If it was still operational, even in partial form, he could tap into military frequencies, maybe even send out an encrypted distress signal. But first he had to move. Every step felt like walking with knives in his side. His vision pulsed. His hearing faded in and out. But his focus was unshakable. He used a fallen branch as a walking stick, leaning heavily as he climbed. The sun rose higher, but his mind was elsewhere, already 3 moves ahead, like chess in a war zone. They think I'm dead. Good. They think I can't move. Even better. They have no idea what I'm about to do. By the time twilight bled into the valley, Adam had reached a narrow bluff overlooking the valley floor. The wind here was stronger, colder, but clearer. He saw everything: the path the chopper had flown, the scattered dirt tracks of ATVs far below. And in the distance, across a broken ridge, the silhouette of a collapsed comms tower. Half ruined, but still standing. He smiled, wincing as the movement tugged at his ribs. His body was failing, but his mind never sharper. He sat on a flat stone and pulled out the dog tag again, fingers tracing the words. For Caleb. That was his compass, his fuel, his reason. Then he looked up and whispered into the wind. You threw me into the river, but I didn't drown. You broke my bones, but I didn't shatter. You wanted silence, but now you'll hear me coming. The wind answered with a howl, not of fear, but of warning. Adam Briggs was not just alive. He was awakening. The night returned without apology. By the time Adam Briggs reached the base of the broken comms tower, the sun had long disappeared behind the peaks, leaving behind only a narrow band of crimson that bled across the sky like a wound. The wind had sharpened, carrying with the dry scent of dust and old blood, the kind only men who'd survived war could recognize. The tower loomed ahead like a skeleton of metal and rust. It had once served as a relay point for forward operating units during the early years of the war, but that was over a decade ago. Now it leaned slightly to one side, its frame bent from age and bullet holes. Adam moved like a ghost, low and calculated. The pain in his ribs had dulled into a constant throb, a background noise he'd trained himself to ignore. His right shoulder was stiff, but held in place thanks to the makeshift brace. His steps were slow, but deliberate, hugging the shadows like an old friend. He entered the tower's base, a concrete bunker half sunken into the earth, its door long torn off. Inside it smelled of mildew and thyme. Rats had nested here once, but tonight it was his. He lowered himself to the ground, exhaling through clenched teeth. The air was colder inside, but still. No wind. No exposure. Safe. For now. Adam took off his jacket and laid it over a pile of dry rags in the corner. He winced as he leaned back against the wall. His breath came shallow but steady. He reached into the side pouch of his gear and pulled out the transceiver again. It was scratched. The antenna barely clung to its hinge, but it still worked. He tuned the dial slowly. Static filled the room like whispers in the dark. Then a click, a burst of encrypted chatter, voices. Secure the valley route. Confirmation received. Asset eliminated. He hit record. Logged the time. Then another voice broke through. Familiar. Cold. Precise. I want visual confirmation. Briggs was never a loose end I liked. It was Voss. Adam's blood turned to ice. The voice continued. Rourke said, It's done, but I don't buy it. Search the drop zone again. Sweep the river. A pause. Then if he's still breathing, finish it. This time, burn everything. Adam shut the transceiver off, so they were coming back, not to look for him, to erase him. He leaned his head back against the cold concrete. For the first time in a long time, he closed his eyes, without thinking of escape routes or ambush angles. In the quiet, memories came. Not of war, of home. Caleb standing on a chair in the kitchen trying to make pancakes. The batter was everywhere, ceiling dog, even the mailbox somehow. The boy had looked up at him, flower in his hair, and said, "Dad, do you think Superman has bad days too?" Adam had laughed. "All the time, bud." But he never quits. He opened his eyes again. The pain was still there. But so was the fire. No, he thought, I'm not quitting either. The wind outside had picked up. The old tower groaned softly under its weight. Adam forced himself upright. He needed warmth, fuel, something to keep his core from shutting down. He scoured the bunker. In a rusted drawer beneath a collapsed desk, he found a miracle, a pack of emergency rations long expired, but still sealed. Beside it, a tarnished metal lighter. No fuel, but the spark wheel worked. He gathered dry rags and a handful of twigs from outside, returned, and built a tiny fire in the center of the room. It took a dozen strikes of the lighter, but finally flame. It danced like a living thing, casting flickering shadows on the walls. He unwrapped the ration and bit into it. It tasted like chalk and regret, but it filled the void in his stomach. As he ate, he pulled out a small notepad from the inside of his boot waterproof paper. Military issue, the kind used to jot down last words or battlefield coordinates. He flipped to a blank page, then began to write in block letters. If found name, Adam Briggs. Former 75th Ranger Regiment. Mission compromised. Betrayed by Voss and operatives. Evidence on transceiver. Priority get to command. Tell Caleb. Tell him I never stopped fighting. He paused, then underlined the final sentence. Tell him I stood back up. Outside the wind howled again. And in the howling came something new. A distant crack. Not natural. Not wind. A footstep on gravel. Adam's eyes snapped open. He killed the fire, instantly smothering it with a boot. Darkness swallowed the room. He slid behind the doorframe, knife in hand, breath shallow, ears tuned. Another step, then a voice, rough, mocking. Place smells like rats. You sure he'd come here? Another voice, cooler, recognizable. Briggs is old school. He'd remember this tower. Fan out. Rourke. Adam's grip tightened around the blade, so they were here already. Quicker than he thought. Probably tracking radio chatter. But they didn't know he was listening too. And more importantly, they didn't know what he'd become since the fall. He crouched low, heart steady. He wasn't strong enough to fight them directly, not yet. But he didn't need strength. He had something better. Patience. He'd wait. Watch. Learn. Because war wasn't just about firepower. It was about timing. Strategy. And Adam Briggs, the man they thought was broken, bleeding, and buried, was about to turn the shadows into his greatest ally. The first light of dawn peeled away the darkness like a blade slicing gauze. On the high ridge above the valley, nothing moved. The mountain air was thin and razor cold, slicing into the lungs like glass. In the silence, even the birds seemed hesitant to announce the day. And yet something stirred, not with the clumsiness of men, but with the stillness of a predator. Adam Briggs lay flat against the shale, partially hidden beneath a narrow outcropping. His breath was controlled, shallow, matching the rhythm of the wind. The pain in his side pulsed with each heartbeat, but he'd accepted it. Now pain was no longer an enemy. It was just part of the kit. Through a cracked, dust-smeared pair of field binoculars, relics from his old deployment gear, Adam watched them. 3 men. They moved cautiously through the valley below, their movements stilted, unnatural. They weren't tracking like soldiers. They were searching like men trying not to be watched, which meant they were afraid. Good. He shifted the binoculars slightly. There. Blake Rourke, standing just left of center, gesturing toward the riverbed. His beard was thicker than Adam remembered, but that same smug posture remained, chest out, hand resting on his thigh holster, like he expected someone to admire it. Adam adjusted the focus. Blake was speaking voice, just barely caught by the small parabolic mic Adam had rigged from the broken comms tower antenna and the radio's speaker coil. The signal was weak, but usable. "I don't care what it looks like. The body's not here. He's gone." Another man replied, nasal anxious. "You said no one survives that fall." Blake sneered. "You ever met Briggs? He's not no one." A third man spit into the dirt. "Ghost stories, man. We dumped him. Ain't no way he a rock tumbled from above. Just a small one. Enough to make them jump." Rourke's head snapped up toward the slope. "Hold up! Did you hear that?" The anxious one spun in a circle, rifle raised. "There's something moving." Adam watched them squirm. He wasn't up there anymore. He had moved. Silently. Flanked them. The rock had been a decoy, a classic misdirection. He smiled to himself. Simple tactics still work when fear is in the room. Down below, Rourke barked orders. "Check the ridge. Flank both sides. Eyes everywhere." One of the men broke off, climbing toward the trail that Adam had long abandoned. His steps were rushed, careless. Adam waited. Watched. The man passed by a narrow ledge right where Adam had lodged a cluster of stacked stones, barely balanced, anchored by tension and gravity. As the soldier stepped onto the lower edge crack, the stone pile collapsed, triggering a slide of shale and loose rock. The man screamed, arms flailing as he fell sideways, tumbling down the slope in a cloud of dust and debris. He hit the riverbed hard, groaning in pain. His rifle lay several feet away, jammed under a boulder. Rourke cursed. "Get him up, now!" The anxious man rushed to help, his rifle swinging loosely, barrel down. Adam's voice crackled through their comms. Not loud, just present. "You came looking for a ghost. Now you're the ones being haunted. Panic. Where is he, North Ridge? He's on the ridge." "No." I saw movement behind the boulders. Adam wasn't in either location. He was 200 yards away, hiding in the brush, holding the speaker unit from the damaged transceiver on loop. The recorded message played again. "You came looking for a ghost." The effect was immediate. Rourke fired into the rocks. Another man fired toward the tree line. Their nerves were snapping. Adam watched it unfold like theater. He wasn't hunting them with bullets. He was using doubt. For the next 2 hours, Adam played their fear like an instrument. A misplaced boot print, a distant echo, a discarded shell casing placed intentionally in the open. He never revealed himself, never fired a shot. But each move drained them. By midday, the anxious one, Davis, he finally heard the name, refused to move unless Rourke walked first. The injured man limped, and their supply packs were dwindling. That's when Adam saw what he needed. Rourke, frustrated, turned on his mic. "Voss, we've got nothing. The terrain's eating us alive." A pause. Then the cold voice of Harland Voss filled the channel. "Stay on him. No loose ends. I want his dog tag." Adam's hand went to his chest. He looked down at the steel pendant resting beneath his shirt, still warm from his body, still engraved with Caleb's name. They want this. Then they'd have to earn it. That night, Adam retreated to a shallow cave further down the valley, a spot he'd marked years ago during recon. Inside, he patched the wound in his side, using a needle and thread from a sewing kit salvaged in the comms bunker. Each stitch was fire. But pain meant progress. He bit down on a leather strap, sewed it closed, then wrapped the ribs with what remained of his undershirt. He didn't sleep. Not fully. Just drifted in and out of that thin veil between awareness and exhaustion. And when he dreamed of Caleb, sitting on the porch, laughing, asking a question Adam couldn't hear. At dawn, Adam stood at the cave's mouth, looking down at the valley again. His muscles ached, his ribs throbbed, but his mind, sharp as ever. He took out a piece of broken mirror from his kit, angled it toward the rising sun. A quick flash of reflection, then off. Once, twice, 3 times. A signal. Not to them. To whoever else might be listening. To command. To hope. The hunt was on now. But roles had reversed. Adam wasn't the prey anymore. He was the phantom stalking the mountains. The myth they whispered about but couldn't catch. The ghost they thought they'd killed. And this ghost was just getting started. There's a kind of silence in the mountains that feels sacred, not the absence of sound, but the presence of watching. Adam Briggs had lived in combat zones, where every alley held danger, and every window a potential sniper. But this was different. This was the kind of silence that tested not just your reflexes, but your mind. And that was where Adam thrived. By the 3rd day, the men hunting him had changed. They no longer moved with soldiers' confidence. They flinched at bird calls. Their fingers hovered nervously over triggers. They had lost cohesion, trust, even basic discipline. The mountain had stripped them, but it wasn't the terrain doing the work. It was Adam. Not his fists, not his bullets, his thinking. That morning, he'd left a fresh boot print near the south ridge facing the wrong direction. It led to a trail he never used. On that trail, he placed a broken canteen with a blood-stained cloth tucked inside. Staged, calculated. They found it by noon. Fresh, Rourke had said. He's hurt. Close. They followed the fake trail for hours, wasting precious daylight. When the sun dipped below the peaks, they realized the trail had vanished into nothing. And Adam watched it all. From above. Unblinking. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was studying them. Every word on the radio. Every hesitation. Every time Rourke snapped at Davis. Every glance. That night, under the dim stars, Adam drew a mental map in the dirt near his shelter. 3 names, 3 patterns, 3 flaws. Rourke, aggressive, prideful, refuses to admit fear. Always leads, never delegates. Vulnerable when enraged. Davis, anxious, trigger-happy, reactive. Follows without question. Weak when separated. Mendez, quiet, calculating. The only one Adam respected. But trust wavers, keeps glancing at Rourke like he knows something's off. Divide and disorient. That was the next move. At sunrise, Adam began. Step 1, auditory chaos. He retrieved the speaker coil and hacked it into a branch using wire and fabric. He programmed the playback to a 60-second delay. He climbed high, almost 700 feet above their last known location, and lodged the device behind a rock face. Then he moved 2 ridges over. Fast. Silent. When the first message played, it bounced across the canyon like a ghost. You tried to bury me, but I grew roots. Rourke cursed. Davis fired into the shadows. Mendez stood still, staring at the echo. Then before they could locate the source, a second recording rang out from the opposite direction. I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to watch you fall apart, Rourke shouted. He's got gear! He's playing us! Mendez muttered under his breath. He's not playing! He's planning! Exactly. By midday, they were exhausted. Food low. Morale broken. Rourke slapped Davis when he dropped his rifle. Mendez stopped speaking entirely. Adam, meanwhile, was eating berries from a patch he remembered from his old maps. High-protein, sour, but safe. He found a stream and refilled his pouch, filtered the water with a crushed charcoal cloth he'd kept since the fall. His body hurt, but his mind was sharp. Sharper than it had been in years. There was something about being hunted that reminded you why you'd learned to become a ghost in the first place. That evening, he made his move. He descended to the ravine while the group camped near the riverbank. Using a slingshot rigged from tree bark and rubber wire, he launched a stone wrapped in cloth, soaked in sulfur, and crushed berries toward their fire. When it landed, it exploded in a puff of violet smoke, harmless but dramatic. They panicked, guns drawn. Then Adam's voice again through the speaker planted earlier. This is the part where you start seeing things that aren't there. Davis ran. Mendez followed. Rourke screamed after them, but they were gone. Divide. Disorient. Just as planned. Later that night, Adam moved in closer than ever before. He watched Rourke alone at the fire, cleaning his gun with angry, sharp movements. Rourke muttered, "You think this is over, Briggs. You think you're smart." Adam almost laughed, but he didn't. He simply watched. Because watching was power. Back in his shelter, Adam examined the data chip he'd salvaged from the comms relay. It wasn't much, just fragments, but enough to piece together that Voss hadn't just sent a kill order. He'd arranged payouts, through private contractors, civilian arms routes disguised as aid convoys, and Adam had the receipts. He just needed one clean transmission, one strong signal, 1 minute of bandwidth to send the whole dirty truth into the hands of someone who cared. But for that, he needed time. And the only way to buy it was to finish breaking the men hunting him. He pulled out the dog tag from his neck. It was scratched now, worn, but still legible. For Caleb, so he'll never fear the fall. He rubbed the metal between his thumb and forefinger, not for comfort, for focus. This wasn't vengeance. It wasn't even survival anymore. It was legacy. It was truth. They threw him from the sky, thinking gravity would do the job. They didn't count on the mind of a ranger. And now, Adam Briggs was going to teach them a final lesson. You can't outrun a man who's already made peace with the fall. Night had swallowed the mountains whole. No stars, no moon. Just the oppressive dark like a velvet curtain pulled over the world. It was the kind of darkness that made men believe in monsters, and tonight, for the first time, Blake Rourke and his men did. Because something out there was hunting them. And it wasn't human. At least not anymore. Adam Briggs crouched beside a broken pine near the edge of a narrow ledge, fingers adjusting the frequency dial on his battered transceiver. The small speaker clicked, hissed, and then a whisper of sound emerged through the static. Copy that. Repeat negative contact. Assumed KIA. He leaned closer, adjusting the broken antenna using a length of copper wire from a gutted flashlight. The signal crackled, cleared, then hit gold. Rourke's voice, live, raw. We've lost contact with Davis. He just ran off. No eyes for over an hour. Another voice responded. Mendez. Calm but clipped. I don't like this. He's doing something. Hurting us. Then the unmistakable chill of Harland Voss cutting in over the encrypted channel. Contain it. Eliminate Briggs. I don't care if you have to burn the entire valley to find him. If he leaks what he knows, we're all done. Adam smiled. There it is. The confession. Short. Fragmented. But damning. Enough to crack open an investigation if it reached the right ears. He pressed record. The red light flickered to life. Then he did something Rourke would never expect. He transmitted. Just 5 words across every unsecured channel he could tap. I'm still alive, Voss. Panic bloomed instantly. From the tree line below, Adam heard shouting. Rourke's voice enraged. Get a trace on that now, too late. Adam had already relocated. The signal was bouncing from a dead radio tower half a mile away, one he'd wired the night before. He slid back into the underbrush, low and quiet, every step a whisper. His lungs burned, ribs screamed, but his mind was sharper than ever. This wasn't just survival. This was exposure. He was going to make them unravel themselves. The next hour he launched the second phase. Using the same speaker coil, he planted another decoy deeper this time, in a narrow gully between two ridgelines. He recorded a new message, this time not taunting. This time, truth. I served with honor. I buried friends in countries that don't exist on maps. I carried secrets no man should have to carry. And still, I stayed silent. Until you tried to erase me. He set it to loop, turned the volume just high enough. Then, using the last charge in the signal booster, he linked the feed to the open military distress channel. Now, anyone listening on US frequencies would hear him. Not clearly, not easily, but enough. The voice of a dead man speaking from the grave. Down in the valley, Mendez froze as the voice crackled through their radios. I carried secrets. Still, I stayed silent. Rourke's face went pale. That's not a loop. That's live. He ripped the headset from his ear. We need to move. Now. Mendez hesitated. You said this was a clean-op. You said he was gone. Rourke glared at him. He should be. Nobody survives that fall. Mendez didn't look convinced anymore. Maybe he didn't survive. Maybe something else got up. Meanwhile, Adam moved like wind through branches. Quiet. Relentless. He wasn't strong enough yet for a direct confrontation, but he didn't need to be. All he had to do was let the cracks spread. And they were. Rourke's team was coming apart at the seams. Davis was still missing. Mendez was doubting. And Rourke, he was rattled. As midnight approached, Adam returned to the old Ranger cache he'd discovered on the northern ridge. A hidden compartment beneath a rusted boulder revealed what he'd hoped a flare gun, 3 flares, and a compact battery with just enough charge to attempt a long-range encrypted burst. He connected the transceiver, input the code. The signal took nearly 2 minutes to sync, then click. Access granted. Adam spoke softly, voice clear. This is Adam Briggs, former 75th Ranger Regiment. Mission compromised. Internal betrayal. Classified materials in possession. Evidence of command-level corruption. Immediate extraction and investigation required. Repeat static. Cut him off. The battery died mid-transmission. But it was enough. Enough for someone to hear. Enough to start something. He fired the first flare. Bright. Blinding. Orange. A signal not for help, but for truth. From below, Mendez saw it. He stared, mouth slightly open. Rourke cursed. No. No, he didn't. That can't be him. Mendez lowered his rifle. He's not running. No, Rourke said. Trembling, he's calling us out. Back in the darkness, Adam holstered the flare gun and leaned against a stone. The exhaustion hit him like a freight train. His body was at its limit, muscles twitching. Blood dried stiff to his shirt. But he didn't close his eyes, didn't let himself drift. Instead, he pulled the dog tag from under his collar. Caleb's name glinted in the firelight. So he'll never fear the fall. Adam whispered. Not just the fall, but the silence after. Then, as the fire crackled low, he spoke once more into the recorder, not for command this time, but for his son. If you hear this, Caleb, know that I didn't disappear. I was just lost for a while. But I never stopped fighting. And I never stopped loving you. He clicked. Safe. And in the silence that followed, the mountains held their breath, because Adam Briggs had done the impossible. He had turned betrayal into confession, and silence into truth. Adam Briggs had been trained to wait. In the Rangers, patience wasn't just a virtue, it was a weapon. Now hidden beneath a twisted ridgeline that overlooked the narrow valley corridor, he prepared to use it one last time. Because tonight wasn't about evasion anymore. It was about exposure. The pieces were all in place. He had the confession Voss's voice recorded cleanly through the hacked radio. He had the signal the emergency flare already seen the half-broadcasted SOS, and he hoped someone out there still listening. He had the terrain, the old ranger checkpoint at Ridge 17, a natural funnel, one entrance, one exit, high ground with a single blind corner. And he had them. Rourke, Mendez, and somewhere out there still hiding Davis. They were coming, because they had to. Voss needed the dog tag, needed silence. Adam was the final loose end. But he'd turned that loose end into a fuse, and now the explosion was coming. He spent the day rigging the approach, not with bombs. He had no C4, no claymores, no tripwires. But he had gravity, and fear, and the psychology of men who believed they were being hunted by a ghost. Near the tree line, he suspended flat stones above the trail using twine and a tension release made from a pine branch. Step wrong, and they'd drop loud sudden, enough to make a man spin and fire blindly. Further in, he lined the path with crushed berry pulp and mud, creating false trails with barefoot imprints, small as if from a child. He knew it would rattle them, knew that in their cracked minds, a footprint that didn't belong could feel like a message from something unnatural. And finally, he rigged the comms again. This time on loop. It's not the fall that kills you. It's the silence afterward. He didn't need to fight them. He just needed them to implode. By sundown, he was in position, hidden behind the old supply shack at Ridge 17, eyes on the narrow approach. He hadn't been here in over a decade, but the place hadn't changed. The sandbags were still scattered. The busted solar panel still hung from its frame, and the American flag, faded torn, but still intact, lay half buried beneath the dust. He picked it up, folded it military style, placed it on the center crate like a signal. Then he waited. They came just after dark, footsteps, whispered orders, the crunch of boots. Adam didn't move, didn't blink, only listened. Mendez appeared first, steady, calm. Rifle low but eyes scanning. His silhouette moved like a man who still knew how to fight, but didn't want to. Then Rourke, sloppier now, sweating, twitching. His voice rasped. "Briggs, you hear me, you son of a," silence answered, except the faint radio hiss. "It's not the fall that kills you." Rourke swung his rifle toward the noise. "Turn it off. Shut him up." Mendez didn't move. "He's not here." "Yes, he is," Rourke snapped. "He's always here." Mendez turned slowly. "You sure this was ever about him?" Rourke's face contorted. "What the hell does that mean? You dragged us into this op without clearance. You said it was clean. You said he had to go. Because he was a threat." To who, Blake Mendez asked, voice low. To Voss? Or to you? The wind carried their words straight to Adam's ears. He knew it now. Mendez wasn't here to kill him. Maybe he never had been. Then Davis stumbled in from the ridge, eyes wild, jacket torn. "He's not human," he stammered. "I saw him. He vanished." Rourke grabbed him by the collar. "Get it together," Davis shook. "He's watching us. I feel him." Adam smiled, quiet and unseen. He was ready. He stepped into the open. 3 rifles snapped toward him instantly, but he didn't flinch. He looked calm. Torn shirt, dirty face, but standing tall, unafraid. Even in the dim light they could see it, the dog tag on his chest, the flare gun in one hand, and in the other, a small radio with a blinking red light. "You wanted me," Rourke Adams said. "Now here I am." Rourke raised his rifle. On your knees, Adam didn't move. He looked at Mendez. Still following this man, Mendez hesitated. "Just enough." "The world thinks I'm dead," Adam continued. "And if you kill me now, that lie lives on. But this," he held up the radio, "this is live, broadcasting. Right now." Rourke's eyes widened. "They're listening, Blake. Command. Maybe even the press. And Voss, Adam smiled coldly. He's sweating bullets by now. Rourke stepped forward. Liar. Adam held his ground. Pull that trigger, and every encrypted channel from here to Washington hears the truth. The money. The arms deals. The kill order. You think Voss will protect you? Then Mendez lowered his rifle. Is it true? He asked Rourke. Did Voss authorize this? Rourke snapped. You're a coward, Mendez. But Mendez didn't answer. He stepped back. And in that hesitation, the truth landed. Adam pressed a button on the radio. Voss's voice boomed through the speaker. If he's still breathing, finish it. This time, burn everything. Davis dropped his weapon. Oh, God. Mendez stared at Rourke. We were never the heroes. Rourke screamed and raised his rifle. Crack, a single gunshot split the air. But it wasn't Adam. It was Mendez. Rourke collapsed, eyes wide in shock, breath stuttering as blood spread across his chest. Then stillness. Just wind. Just the stars. And the weight of everything finally crashing down. Mendez lowered his weapon. I didn't come here to die for someone else's lies. Adam nodded. Neither did I. They stood in silence. Then Adam turned his face to the stars and fired his last flare, high, brilliant, golden. A signal not of surrender, but of truth secured. Ridge 17 had seen war before. It had echoed with gunfire and prayers soaked in the sweat of young men and the silence of the fallen. But tonight it bore witness to something older than combat. Justice and reckoning. The flare arced high into the dark sky, splitting the night open like lightning. Golden light cascaded over the jagged terrain, revealing the battered silhouette of Adam Briggs, standing tall in the clearing, shoulders squared, chest rising steady despite the bruises and torn flesh. Beside him, Mendez stood silent, rifle-slung eyes, hollow but steady. Davis was kneeling off to the side, head in his hands, mumbling prayers or curses, maybe both. And at their feet, Blake Rourke lay still, the blood beneath him drying fast, soaking into the soil he'd once walked with arrogance. The mountains didn't mourn him, and neither did Adam. The flare's glow faded into embers across the ridge. Then came the sound. Low at first. Distant. Rotor blades. Approaching fast. 2 sets. Adam's eyes narrowed. They're early. Mendez looked up. Extraction Team Adam didn't answer. Because he didn't know. And that was the problem. Minutes later, the first helicopter came into view. A military transport, unmarked, flying low and fast over the ridge. It circled once, before setting down hard 50 yards away, blades kicking up dust and rock. Adam raised the radio to his lips. Blackbird 1 identify. No response. A moment later, the side door opened and 3 armed men emerged. Their uniforms were clean. American. But the posture was wrong. Too casual, too practiced. Mercenaries, not soldiers. Mendez muttered, "This isn't good." Adam's voice dropped to a whisper. "Second bird's coming in. That'll be the real one." He was betting everything on it. Command had to have heard the broadcast by now. If they hadn't, he was about to die on his feet. The lead mercenary approached, rifle resting lazily against his chest. "You, Adam Briggs," he called out. Adam didn't move. "Who's asking?" The man smirked. "Your ride's here. Courtesy of Colonel Voss. He sends his regards." Adam's jaw tightened. So this was Voss's last play. "Send a cleanup team. Finish the job. No paperwork. No survivors." "Drop your weapons," the man continued. "All of you." Mendez looked at Adam. "Orders?" Adam didn't blink. Hold. Then, salvation. The second helicopter broke over the horizon. Different flight pattern. Military-issue Chinook. Markings visible. U.S. Army. Adam's flare had worked. He raised both arms, holding the radio in one hand and the dog tag in the other, letting them shine under the floodlight. From the new chopper, a voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "Stand down and identify. This is Commander Shepard with Joint Special Operations Response Team. We are acting under direct order from Central Command." The mercenaries froze. The lead one cursed, lifting his weapon. "Wrong choice," Adam muttered. Crack Mendez's shot landed between the mercenaries' eyes. Chaos erupted. Gunfire tore through the ridge. Bullets pinged off rock. Dirt exploded near Adam's boots as he dove behind cover, dragging Davis with him. Mendez fired again, dropping a second man. The third ran, but was gunned down from the air by a sniper in the hovering Chinook. Within seconds, it was over. Dust settled. Silence returned. The smell of cordite hung in the air. And for the first time in days, Adam Briggs exhaled without pain. The extraction team landed cleanly. Soldiers in full gear swarmed the ridge, checking vitals, securing the area logging evidence. Commander Shepard approached, removing his helmet. Stern face, clean eyes. No agenda. "You Briggs," Adam nodded. "What's left of him?" Shepard extended a hand. "You did the impossible." Adam didn't shake it. "Not yet." "Is Voss in custody?" Shepard's eyes tightened. "We moved on him the minute your broadcast hit. We have the data, the tapes, the money trail." Adam nodded slowly. "Good." Only then did he take the handshake. Mendez approached. "You gonna be all right?" Adam looked at him, the man who'd once followed Rourke without question, who now stood with dust on his boots and blood on his conscience. "Yeah," Adam said. "But you've got a decision to make." Mendez nodded. "I'm turning myself in. But I want to testify, every word." Adam clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Then you're part of the healing." As the team loaded up, Davis was placed on a stretcher, still dazed, but quiet. Adam stepped toward the Chinook, then paused. He walked back to where Rourke's body lay. For a long moment he stared at the man who'd betrayed him, the man who'd laughed when Adam fell from the sky. Then gently, Adam placed the folded American flag over Rourke's chest. "Not for you," he murmured. "For the uniform you wore. For the men you failed." Then he turned away. Inside the helicopter, Adam sat near the window. He held the dog tag in his hand, thumb tracing the words. "For Caleb. So he'll never fear the fall." A medic cleaned his side, rewrapped the wound, and checked his vitals. "You shouldn't be alive," she whispered. Adam looked out at the mountains fading behind them. "I'm not," he said quietly. "I'm something else now." As the Chinook lifted off Ridge 17 grew smaller below them, just another scar in the earth. But for Adam Briggs, it was holy ground. Because that was where he stopped running, where he stood tall, where he rose. Washington, D.C. 2 days later. A storm rolled over the Capitol gray clouds, blotting out the sky like a judgment passed from above. Rain beat against the Pentagon's stone walls in a steady rhythm, as though even the heavens refused to remain silent. Inside a secure briefing room buried beneath 5 stories of bureaucracy, Adam Briggs stood in front of a half-moon table lined with stars, generals, admirals, and civilian defense officials, each with their own medals, secrets, and scars. His face was clean-shaven, now wound-stitched, and bruises faded to yellow. But the fire in his eyes hadn't dimmed. If anything, it had sharpened like steel forged by betrayal. A massive screen behind him displayed frozen images from the Ridge 17 operation, the flare piercing the night sky. Rourke's mercenaries, with illegal foreign patches sewn inside their jackets. Satellite photos showing the unauthorized flight paths of Voss's ghost birds. And finally the voice. If he's still breathing, finish it. This time, burn everything. Harland Voss's voice. Recorded, verified, cross-referenced, undeniable. The silence in the room was suffocating. A general finally leaned forward. Colonel Voss is now in custody at Fort Belvoir. He's denied nothing. Adam gave a small nod. He wouldn't. Another official, older, more cautious, tapped a pen against the table. Mr. Briggs, your report indicates you had several opportunities to execute the operatives pursuing you. Yet, you didn't. Adam met his gaze evenly. I wasn't sent into the mountains to become a murderer. I went to find truth, and I brought it back. Even after they tried to erase you, Adam's voice didn't waver. I don't honor them. I honor the uniform they wore. I've buried too many good men to confuse the two. The room went quiet again. Outside, the rain eased into mist. Inside, the truth settled like a stone dropped into deep water. Justice long delayed was finally landing. That evening, as the hearings moved behind closed doors, Adam sat alone on the Pentagon steps. The wind was cooler now. His ribs ached less. The world had started spinning again, but slower. Gentler. A black SUV pulled up beside the curb. Commander Shepard stepped out, no helmet this time, just a baseball cap, and the unmistakable posture of someone who'd never truly left the battlefield. He handed Adam a plain envelope. Inside, a letter of formal apology from the Department of Defense, a reinstated benefits package, and a plane ticket, Texas Shepard said. Home. Adam smiled faintly. Didn't think they'd make it that easy. They didn't, Shepard replied. You did. 12 hours later, the plane descended over the dry plains of West Texas. The sky was open, endless, no longer a weapon, but a welcome. As the wheels touched down, Adam stared out the window. The clouds were clearing. The horizon burned gold. This time, no one was waiting with orders or lies. Just a boy. At the base of the stairs, Caleb stood in a faded hoodie, and Jean's hair, longer now, awkward in the way only 10-year-old boys could be. But his eyes lit up the second he saw his father. Dad Adam barely made it 2 steps before Caleb slammed into his chest, arms tight around his waist. He winced, the ribs still tender, but pulled the boy in and held him like a lifeline. You're really back, Caleb whispered. Adam kissed the top of his head. Told you I'd never disappear. Just got delayed. They drove home in silence, windows down. Wind blowing through the truck like a hymn. At a red light, Caleb glanced over. They said, "You were a hero." Adam shrugged. Heroes are just people who keep walking when it hurts. Caleb thought for a moment. Did it hurt? Adam looked at the boy. His boy. The reason he fought crawled, bled, rose. Yeah, he said softly. More than I can explain. But you still stood up. Adam smiled. Every time. Back home, Adam stepped into the house like a man rediscovering gravity. The photos were still on the mantel, his boots still by the door. A note on the fridge written in Caleb's messy scrawl read, "Welcome home. Dad, I never doubted you." He closed his eyes, letting the words settle deep. Then he reached into his duffel bag and pulled out the dog tag. He knelt, placed it in Caleb's hand. You keep this now. Caleb's eyes widened. But it's yours? Adam smiled. It was mine to survive. It's yours to remember. That night, Adam sat alone on the back porch, a warm cup of coffee in hand. The stars above were the same ones that had watched him fall. Now, they watched him heal. In the distance, a plane cut across the sky, not a predator, not a threat, just a vessel returning someone home. Adam raised his eyes. You threw me out of the sky, he whispered. But I chose how I landed. Behind him, the screen door creaked. Caleb stepped out, blanket over his shoulders. Can't sleep, Adam shook his head. Didn't want to miss this. They sat side by side in silence, and above them, the sky, once cruel, now kind, held no more secrets. Texas. 3 weeks later. The sun hung low over the flat horizon, spilling a warm, golden hush across the sleepy town of Junction, Texas, the kind of place where porch swings creaked louder than gossip, and every pickup truck had a history. Adam Briggs walked with a cane now. Not because he needed it, not entirely. His body was healing faster than the doctors expected, but the cane was more than support, it was a reminder. Every step forward had been earned, and sometimes in the still moments of early morning, he still felt the wind in his lungs from that fall. Still heard the rotors, still tasted blood, but not fear. Never again. The VA hospital had offered him a bed and a therapist. He took neither. Instead, he moved back into the old ranch house at the edge of town, a weathered place with chipped siding, creaky floorboards, and a soul deeper than its foundations. It had been his father's before him. Now it belonged to Caleb, and every wall whispered stories. Caleb adjusted quickly. Kids are like that. They adapt even when they don't understand. But Adam knew his son carried more than he showed. So he didn't push. He just showed up for breakfast, school drop-offs, backyard baseball. One evening, Adam found Caleb asleep in the living room, curled up next to the old army duffel he refused to let his dad unpack. His small hand rested on the dog tag that now hung from a shoelace around his neck. Adam sat beside him quietly, because healing sometimes sounded like nothing at all. But not everyone had forgotten. One morning, a stranger knocked on the door. She was in uniform, army green crisp, captain's bars on her collar, short blonde hair, steady eyes. Captain Leah Morgan, she introduced. Pentagon Liaison Veteran Affairs. Adam raised an eyebrow. "You're not from around here." She smiled. "No, sir. But command asked me to hand-deliver this." She handed him a slim folder. Inside, a formal letter from the Secretary of Defense. A commendation for extraordinary integrity and service of truth and national security. A note handwritten. "You fell through the sky and landed us on solid ground. We won't forget." General Whitlock Adam closed the folder. "That all?" Morgan hesitated. "There's one more thing." From her breast pocket, she withdrew a velvet box, opened it. Inside, the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, the highest non-combat honor in the military. Adam stared at it a long moment. "Never thought I'd get one of those without dying first." Morgan's voice softened. "You almost did." He nodded, then closed the box gently. "Can I decline it?" She tilted her head. "You can. But your son might want it someday." Adam said nothing, just looked past her toward the distant hills. Morgan followed his gaze. "You planning on staying here for now?" he said. "The world can spin without me for a while." She smiled again, saluted sharply, and left without another word. The next few days passed quietly. Adam fixed the squeaky porch swing, replaced the screen door, took Caleb to the town diner for pancakes on Saturdays. People nodded when they saw him, not with awe, but with respect. They didn't ask about the fall, didn't mention the hearings, or Voss, or Ridge 17. Small towns understand what the world often forgets, that not talking can be its own kind of reverence. One night, Caleb stood by the back door holding a worn notebook. "Dad," he said, "can I ask you something?" Adam set down his coffee. "Always. Do you dream about it?" Adam didn't pretend to misunderstand. He leaned back, rubbed his jaw. "Sometimes. Not the fall, but the quiet after." Caleb hesitated. "Does it scare you?" Adam looked at him for a long moment. "No. It reminds me I survived." Then he smiled softly. "You know what scared me most?" Caleb shook his head. "Not being here. Missing this." He opened his arms and Caleb stepped into the hug without a word. No more needed to be said. Later that night, Adam stepped outside. The air was still the stars sharp. From the porch, he could see the outline of the old oak tree where Caleb had tied up a tire swing just days before. It swayed slightly in the breeze like it was waving to the dark. He sat down and pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. His own writing, just a few lines, the start of a letter. To the men who left me in the sky. You gave me gravity, but I found my own wings. You buried me in silence, but I rose with truth. You called me dead, but I came home. He folded it again, slipped it back into his chest pocket, then leaned his head back and whispered to the night. Some wars never make the news, but they still need to be won. And so in the quiet of rural Texas, far from battlefields and betrayal, far from cameras and medals, a man who had fallen from the sky walked barefoot through the dust of his front yard. He was not chasing ghosts. He was raising a son. He was not haunted by the silence. He had learned to live inside it. The Pentagon Rotunda was a cathedral of silence. Even the sound of polished boots clicking against its marble floor seemed softened by the weight of history. Banners of campaigns, past lined the upper walls, Normandy, Vietnam, Fallujah, stitched with names soaked in sacrifice. Adam Briggs stood beneath them now, shoulders squared, spine straight, wearing the same olive-green dress uniform he hadn't touched in years. It still fit, though not because his body hadn't changed. It had. But he wore it like armor. Because today wasn't about ceremony. It was about closure. A staff member escorted him down the corridor. The clatter of media cameras echoed faintly behind closed doors, muffled like the past trying to get in. In the next room, dignitaries waited. A general, a senator, a representative from the Department of Defense, and beside the stage, a glass podium beneath a spotlight. The velvet box sat atop it open. Waiting. You sure about this? Commander Shepard asked as he approached from the side. He wasn't in uniform today, just a gray blazer, and the look of a man who still hadn't taken his boots off, even if no one could see them. Adam nodded. Let's get it over with. Shepard hesitated. They want you to speak after. I won't. She's here, Shepard added. Your liaison, Captain Morgan. Adam gave the faintest smile. Good. She's the one who pushed the declassification. Adam glanced at the small crowd beginning to gather behind the rope line. You ever wonder how much truth a country can take? Shepard didn't answer. Because some questions weren't meant for answers. The room filled. Uniforms, cameras, flashes. Then a hush. A 4-star general stepped to the podium. His voice rang with rehearsed authority. Today we recognize an individual who not only upheld the values of this nation, but risked everything to preserve the integrity of its institutions. A screen behind him lit up with the image of Adam standing alone at Ridge 17, flare in one hand, radio in the other. Sergeant First Class Adam Briggs, you were betrayed at altitude, left for dead. Yet you survived not to avenge, but to reveal. And in doing so, you reminded us all, the highest act of loyalty is truth. He motioned for Adam to step forward. Applause followed, respectful, distant. Adam moved with slow precision, not out of ceremony, but because his ribs still ached on cold days. He stood beside the general who pinned the medal on his chest, a 6-pointed star set against a silver shield framed by laurel. The Defense Distinguished Service Medal, the highest honor he'd never asked for. The applause returned. Adam didn't hear it. His eyes had drifted beyond the crowd to the far left wall, where a framed photograph hung newly placed. It was of a soldier in shadow, silhouetted against the setting sun. No name, no caption. Just a quote beneath: some men are remembered, not for what they built, but for what they refused to let fall. Afterward, Adam left through the side corridor. Not a word to the press, not a single interview, no headline quotes. Outside, the day was cool. The city moved on indifferent. Captain Leah Morgan waited near the steps, holding a cup of black coffee and a to-go cup. Still hate speeches, she asked. Only when they're about me. She handed him the cup. They wanted a banquet. Cameras. Parade. Adam took a sip. I wanted coffee. She smirked. Well, you're a national symbol now. Hope you like handshakes. I prefer hand tools. Actually, she reached into her coat and pulled out a folded document. This is why I really waited. He opened it. A single-page memorandum. Assignment Civilian Liaison Special Ethics Task Force. Advisory role only. Oversight on classified internal conduct protocols. Not a desk job, she clarified. Not combat either. But we need people like you to guard against people like him. Adam stared at the paper. Thought I was done. You're not. You just started something. They want you to help rebuild it. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at the metal on his chest. Heavy. Cold. Shining. He unclipped it, held it out. Leah looked confused. You're giving it back. He shook his head. I want it sent somewhere. Where Adam didn't blink. Arlington. Place it on Rourke's father's grave. He died a good soldier. Maybe this'll mean something to his family. Even if Rourke forgot what it meant. Leah swallowed. Slowly took the medal. That's the most Ranger thing I've ever heard, she whispered. Adam turned to go, then paused. One more thing, he said. There's a kid out there, 10 years old. My son. Name's Caleb. She nodded. If I'm going to help rebuild the system, he needs to know why it was worth saving. Leah smiled. I'll make sure he does. That night, Adam returned to Texas. No motorcade, no reception. Just headlights on an empty road and the low hum of country radio. When he walked through the front door, Caleb was asleep on the couch, a bowl of popcorn half spilled in his lap. The TV played an old Western, two men on horseback, watching the horizon in silence. Adam didn't wake him. He sat beside him, pulled a blanket over his small shoulders, and watched the cowboys ride into the sunset. No words, no medals, just home. And for the first time in a very long time. He felt whole. The Texas sky burned orange, its last light stretching long shadows across the open fields behind the Briggs house. It was the kind of evening that seemed to hold its breath, as if the world for one brief hour remembered how to slow down. Adam Briggs stood by the wooden fence at the edge of his property, boots planted firm in the soil hands resting on the smooth top rail. The land stretched quiet before him, endless and open. Nothing but wild grass, the creak of insects, and the soft rustle of wind through mesquite trees. Beside him, Caleb climbed up onto the lowest rung of the fence, arms folded, chin resting on the wood. The boy had grown taller in just the past month, or maybe Adam was just noticing now that the weight of survival had lifted from his shoulders. They stood like that for a while, saying nothing, just breathing the same air. Then Caleb spoke. Do you ever think about it? Adam didn't look down. About what? The fall? Adam turned his head slightly. Caleb's eyes weren't afraid, just curious, seeking, the way only a son could ask a question without layers of judgment. Adam gave a soft exhale, a breath that carried more than words. Every day, he said quietly, but not in the way you'd think. Caleb looked at him. Did it feel like flying? Adam smiled. For a second, maybe. Then it felt like dying. A pause. Then, did you think about me? Adam looked straight ahead, eyes steady on the setting sun. You're the only thing I thought about. He crouched and picked up a small, flat stone, rubbed it between his fingers. The same kind of stone he'd laid traps with on Ridge 17. The same kind of stone he'd felt dig into his spine as he bled out beside a river that should have killed him. People think the hardest part was hitting the ground, Adam said. But it wasn't. It was choosing what to do between the sky and the dirt. Caleb furrowed his brow. What do you mean? Adam tossed the stone gently into the tall grass. I had 3 seconds to think. Just 3. I could have let it happen, just let gravity do its job. Or I could fight, even if it meant pain, even if I didn't know what came next. He looked down at Caleb. You don't need to be in a war to face a fall sun. Life will throw you off cliffs you never see coming. People you trust might push you. People you love might leave. Plans will break. Bodies fail. But you'll always have those 3 seconds, that space between what breaks you and what builds you. Caleb nodded slowly, the weight of the words sinking in deeper than a child his age should have had to carry. But he carried them well. Then he asked, almost whispering, "Were you ever angry?" Adam leaned back against the fence. Yes, at first, at Rourke, at Voss, even at the uniform. But then I realized, carrying that anger was just falling again. Over and over. I wanted to rise. He tapped his chest, right over where the dog tag used to hang. Anger pulls you down, purpose pulls you back up. The wind shifted. Somewhere nearby, a barn owl hooted, the kind of sound that made the world feel older, wiser, and strangely kind. Caleb pulled something from his hoodie pocket. The dog tag. Adam's? He held it out. I think you should keep it. Adam shook his head gently. It's yours now. But what if I don't understand it? Yet Adam knelt down so they were eye to eye. Then that means you're holding it for the right reason. Caleb clutched the tag, its worn surface catching the last golden rays. Later that night, Adam sat on the back porch alone again, as Caleb slept inside. The stars were out in full now, bold and close, as if they'd been waiting for him to finally stop running. In one hand, he held a mug of coffee gone cold. In the other, a small notebook, the one he'd carried since before the fall. He flipped to a blank page, wrote slowly. Lesson from the fall. Gravity never asks your permission, but rising, that's always your choice. He closed the book, sat back. Let the silence settle around him like an old friend. Far above, a jet passed overhead, just a blinking dot against the black canvas of the night. Adam watched it trail off, thought about the men who had thrown him out of the sky, about the men who had lifted him back up. Justice had been done. But justice was never the point. It was understanding. It was transformation. It was showing Caleb, and maybe the rest of the world, that a man could fall from 8,000 feet and still land on his purpose. Just before heading inside, Adam looked up at the stars one last time. People can throw you from the sky, he whispered, but they can't teach you how to stop flying. And then, with quiet steps and a calm heart, he walked inside, closed the door behind him, and let the night hold the rest. Where in the world are you watching from? We'd love to know. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts with us. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply gave you something to think about, consider subscribing to Soul Moment Story for more heartfelt tales like this one. We share stories that honor resilience, kindness, and the quiet strength of everyday heroes. Thank you truly for spending your time with us. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and take care of one another.